Hi, I'm Alexandra, a psychic spiritual counselor, and welcome to Alexandra's Psychic Eye. From early on in life, the subject of death is skirted over and whispered about in corners. It conjures up dark, fearful images in our minds that we never come to full acceptance. And yet the fear that revolves around this subject shapes every stage of our lives. As we reach maturity, we guard our life cautiously against disease and bacteria. We look upon old age as an end to life, and we think of a hospice as a place we silently go to die, as opposed to transmitting to a new dimension. When someone passes, children are denied full exposure, lest it should scare them. But we as adults are the ones who are scared. Stay with us as we hear extraordinary stories of people who have been contacted from beyond. Don't go away. Welcome back. Christine Duminiak is a certified grief recovery specialist and a member of the Association for Death Education and Counseling, and founder and spiritual advisor of Prayer Wave for After-Death Communications, an online grief support and prayer group. Christine is also an author of God's Gift of Love, After-Death Communications, and Heaven Talks to Children, both illuminating books on after-death communication. We're happy to have you back, and thanks for joining us again.
You're
a fascinating, just full of love person, that's all I can say.
And so are you. Right back at you, dear.
Thank you, sweetheart. Now, in your book, Heaven Talks to Children, okay, you relate various stories of children who have been contacted by deceased loved ones. In society, in order to protect a child, a parent will usually explain away death as if it's like a fairy tale. But doing so, I find, and we see the results, it hinders a child's natural spiritual development. They aren't allowed to communicate their encounters. I don't know if you've noticed that. Parents, the children will say, oh, I heard Daddy, he came into my room. Oh, stop that. That's silly, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
When they tell someone early on about it, they're usually, hushed up and told it isn't real, silly one, it's not true, he's dead. And begins the stage of cutting our natural connection with the spirit world and disconnecting us from our spirituality. What problems does this promote, and how do you think, Christine, this can be ameliorated so that a child's natural psychic ability early on, emerges properly into their adult life?
I talk about this in my book, Heaven Talks to Children, and fortunately there were a lot of parents who were receptive and embraced their children's spiritual experiences with their loved ones. But there are so many children that the parents think they're imagining it. Maybe their teachers or professionals think they're hallucinating and they may have a problem because the adult themselves are not aware of after-death communications or the spiritual side of life and how they visit us, and they're schooled in a certain way. And so if they've never heard of it or never experienced it, it'll filter down to the child with that type of thinking. And I like to say that please believe your child, because so many children, the younger the better, are so, they do not differentiate a human being from a spirit. Even if they understand what it means to die, they still will talk about talking to Nana. And there's so many good stories about this.
Why do you think children are so connected to their spirituality?
I think because of their innocence. And it wasn't that long ago. Openness, innocence. It wasn't that long ago that they lived in heaven with God and other spirits. And many times they will remember.
Close.
Yes, that's right. And they're still so pure, and the purity and innocence seems to be a factor in what is happening.
It's like
with
the
them.
pooches here, my little pooch Fluffy.
Who probably can see spirits.
Yes, little the fluffster. When I went to visit my mother weeks ago in Brooklyn, he ran into my mother's bedroom, and he was looking up as if there was someone in the room.
Yes.
And I know it was my father.
Yes.
Definitely 100%. And it was amazing to me. And I've had that with my other dogs. You know, so I believe animals and children, they're just so connected.
Very in tune to the spirit world.
Now, why did you decide to gear your book towards children? Which, I mean, that's really, you know, it's a unique thing.
A number of reasons. When I was writing my first book, God's Gift of Love, After Death Communications, I noticed that there was a distinct difference between children's experiences and adults' experiences. For instance, adults would get like a scent, a touch, maybe a dream, small, subtle ways that they were being visited from their loved ones, or birds, dragonflies, butterflies. But children were actually seeing and hearing from spirits on a regular basis. They did not differentiate a living person from a dead person. And it was so fascinating to me. Plus, I'd gotten a little bit of spiritual nudge to do this book too. So I really researched and interviewed a lot of people, and I also found out that children were being discriminated against from those adults who had different religious beliefs or just never heard of this type of experience. And even parents that would tell their children, please don't talk about that, you know, they would be frightened because they felt like it was something evil. And I wanted to, and I believe God wanted children to be protected.
Absolutely.
And to have parents to have a guidebook, a blueprint on how to deal with your children, how to protect them, how to guide them.
I think that's wonderful.
To keep them along this gift that God is giving them, and to do it in a responsible way. So, you know, that was another factor. And also, when you have children, the younger they are, the better, who are giving you validations of names and people that they've never met. But the adult would know who they were, the family member.
Oh, yeah.
That's a real validation, and it helps skeptics to think maybe there really is something to this. How would that child know, you know, this particular person? That child was born way after that person had died.
Absolutely.
So it helps
it's a validation for the adults around them.
Exactly.
Now, before we go on, I wanted to read a letter that a viewer wrote recently about her own afterlife encounter. Okay, it's a really interesting letter.
Sure.
And I think everyone will.
I love stories of people's experiences.
yeah.
Obviously, it's what books are about.
Dear Alexandra, I had a communication with my paternal grandmother in a dream a few months after she passed away in 1992. We were standing on her old block in Staten Island. Grandma lived over the store there, and she was wearing a pink double-knit dress that zipped up front. I remember this was one of her favorites because of the color, and the zip front was easy on her arthritic hands. She looked healthy and robust, like I remembered her in her 70s. Her eyes were closed the whole time, but she was smiling. She told me, "Don't worry, "It's good here. It's good here." I woke up and I could smell her perfume, Chantilly, in my room. I never thought it was a strange thing. It was oddly comforting. I found out months later that my cousin's wife also has had a visit from Grandma, and she also smelled the same perfume when she woke up. I had never told anyone of my encounter. My daughter was only 5 when my other grandmother died. The night before the funeral ceremony, she woke up and told us not to be sad. She said Great-Grandma and Jesus were just in her room. They told her, "It's okay. Don't be sad." She said Great-Grandma was smiling. So was Jesus. She said they looked happy. I asked her, how did she know it was Jesus? She said, "I just did." From Mrs. R. from Rumson, New Jersey.
Oh, what a
Thank
beautiful,
you, Mrs. R.
beautiful letter.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that wonderful story. We get a lot of really inspiring, beautiful letters from our viewers. It's really amazing. Here's an example of both a contact through the dream state, Christine, and in person. You mentioned that communication can come through in many different ways, and differently in an adult and in a child. Explain again briefly how they may show up and what the person may experience.
A child will actually see a spirit, and the younger the child is, the more that they are convinced that it's just another human being, and they get so frustrated when the adults around them cannot see what they're experiencing, and it's exasperating for them.
Yes, it is.
And that has to get your attention. They're so determined that they're seeing, like, I'll give you a story, one of the stories in my book. There was another woman by the name of Debbie who, her son was died in an automobile accident. He was about 20, 21.
Oh my God.
Terrific bowler. In his career of bowling, he actually bowled a perfect game, a 300 game.
Wow.
Now her granddaughter from another child, one of our other children, was born after her son had died. So the little girl named Jaden had never met this particular uncle. And so one day, when the little girl was 2.5 years old, the mother's babysitting her and they're outside, and she sees the little girl rolling this rock down the sidewalk. And she said, "Jaden, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm bowling with Tony." Now, this little girl had never met Tony, had never been bowling, didn't know what bowling was, and so the grandmother says, "Where? And he's right there. Don't you see him? He's right there." And so she said, "Where?" And so the little girl gets down on the ground, "He's right here. Don't you see him?" And the girl was so upset that the grandmother could not see him, but the mother was convinced that.
That's how I feel, because I see everyone, and I'll walk into a room and say, "Don't you see? Don't you see? There's someone right there, and don't you see what they're doing?" And people are like, "No, I don't see anything. I don't see a thing."
So you're like little Jaden, but grown up.
Little Jaden, but grown up.
Exactly.
I don't know how grown up I am, but yeah. It's amazing, because what there is children are living the remembrance, and they're a constant reminder of that. Some people might think these signs may be a coincidence. How do you respond to this comment?
Well, if you're talking about like subtle signs, not actually a child seeing a spirit, for instance, you might get when my dad was here, he loved Frank Sinatra.